Hey, what is going on, everybody? Today we're going to be getting very controversial. We're going to be responding to somebody named Imani Barbarin, who has recently been involved in what I would call an absolute storm on Twitter. And no, I'm not going to call it X, it's Twitter. Imani has a very large collection of followers over social media, amounting to over 700,000 followers over multiple social media platforms. She made two very controversial posts. One was a series of 3 videos explaining how, quote, white vegans use the exact same tactics that white evangelicals use to determine the value of life of others and enact racism with the cover of superiority. And the second post included multiple screenshots from her notes, cluing in everybody on why exactly she hates white vegans in particular. I don't know if my patience will allow me to respond to both of these posts, but we'll see. 2 things before we get started. I have made a video on this whole concept of, quote, white veganism that I think still holds up today, so definitely check it out after watching this video if you get the chance. Secondly, my merch store is now live. I've been trying to find ways to help garner more financial support for this channel, and this is one of them. I'll be trying to regularly update the store, but for now we have this plant killer design, which you can see here. Pretty sweet. We have a not milk design and an anti-journey social club design. These designs come in the form of multiple types of clothing and even stickers. So please check that all out if you're interested. It'll be linked below. Now let's get on with the response. We're going to start with Imani's 3 videos.
A majority of white veganism is luring people to the alt-right pipeline. Ask me how I know.
Now, this is a very bold claim, and it's also not even clear what white veganism is. I have some conceptions of what people like Imani mean when they say it, but I've seen the term used in very different ways. I cover this more in depth in the video I mentioned earlier that I did on white veganism. But anyway, let's go on to see if she substantiates this very bold claim in this series of videos.
Trigger warnings for racism, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, all the isms. If you have an ism, it's in here.
We have another bold claim. Apparently, all of the isms will be seen in this video from the white vegan she's going to show. As a Jewish person, although I'm interested in seeing all of the isms she discusses that are going to be in this video, I'm particularly interested in the anti-Semitism that she's presumably going to show.
This all started because I asked about non-dairy cheeses.
Now, this is definitely a false claim. While it is true that she did make a tweet asking about vegan cheeses, which was made at around 1:24 p.m. on September 17th, she also posted later that day at 8:18 p.m. this whole "why I can't stand white vegans" set of screenshots from her notes. Now, perhaps she made this later post on the 17th because of some of the responses she got from her cheese post. However, if you look at the influx of, quote, negative responses she received, especially the ones she's going to show in her video later on, they all come well after her "why I can't stand white vegans" post. So I view it as largely dishonest on her part to frame this whole thing as though the negative reactions she got from vegans were largely or fundamentally from this innocent little vegan cheese post.
Now, as you all know, I'm lactose intolerant and belligerent about it. So I was asking for non-dairy cheeses to be a little bit softer on my tum-tums. What ensued was a barrage of racist, anti-Semitic, xenophobic, homophobic, transphobic attacks on me because I'm not vegan.
So she claimed that after asking for vegan cheese, she was hit with a barrage of xenophobia, transphobia, homophobia, anti-Semitism, etc. Oh, and simply because she is not vegan. She provided no evidence for this claim, so we're gonna move on. But before doing that, let's acknowledge that even if she demonstrably showed this, it would not be sufficient evidence showing that, quote, the majority of white veganism is luring people into the alt-right pipeline, as she stated at the beginning of the video. Remember, this is the claim she has the burden of substantiating in her video.
And what I found is that a majority of white vegans are using white supremacist tactics and talking points, but superimposing veganism over it all.
Alright, so first of all, I highly doubt the, quote, white vegans she conversed with alone even constitute the majority of white vegans, let alone the amount that supposedly were using white supremacist tactics and talking points, but superimposing veganism over it all. Which, by the way, that's another thing she has not demonstrated thus far. But let's keep watching, because maybe at the end of the video, we'll see that she has demonstrated these things.
This is the tweet that started it all. I literally asked about non-dairy cheeses that melt.
Not necessarily, as shown earlier. Let's continue.
Now, some vegans gave me suggestions, but they were black and brown people who did so with kindness. So they're not who we're talking about today. No, white vegans inserted themselves to berate me over not being vegan in the first place, even though this was clearly an opportunity.
She provides no evidence for this claim, but either way, it took me 3 seconds to find evidence of the contrary. Amazing.
One of the methodologies that I find that white vegans use is that they pick the perfect victim. Much in the same way that white evangelical Christians use the unborn, white vegans use animals as a proxy so that they can be oppressed. Neither one of those groups are fighting for the actual oppressed. What they aim to do is position themselves as a proxy in absence of actually being an oppressed group of people. And it's particularly easy because, like with the unborn, animals can't speak for themselves. So it's perfect for them. And it is from that vantage point of that appropriated oppression that they get to decide which other life matters.
So we have some mind-reading abilities from Imani. Always gotta love when people pull out these kinds of claims. She's just claiming that white vegans intentionally use animals as a proxy so that they themselves can be oppressed, and that this group of vegans are not fighting for the actual oppressed. Of course, no evidence was provided for this mass psychological assessment of the motivations of white vegans. Perhaps instead, you should ask these white vegans what their motivations are. For example, I live with a white vegan, and I asked him after, watching this really insightful video, what his motivations were for being vegan and even doing activism in the past. And he said, to help oppress animals. Wow. You see how that works? Asking questions concerning a person's motivations for doing certain things and, their psychology, as opposed to baselessly mass psychoanalyzing an entire demographic of people. And of course, based on some tweet interactions you have that presumably don't constitute the entirety of the demographic. She goes on to say that animals are the perfect victim for this imaginary goal of feeling oppressed for white vegans because they can't speak. Here is a much more likely thing based on many conversations I've had with white vegan activists. Maybe this not being able to speak for animals is one of the reasons that white vegans view animals as extremely vulnerable, and therefore they decide to speak up for them because it is the right thing to do, not because they're trying to feel oppressed. She defines this notion of non-oppressed people, like white people, trying to feel oppressed by fighting against the oppression of an oppressed group as appropriated oppression. Again, she is just baselessly mass psychoanalyzing a demographic of people to be operating under what she calls appropriated oppression. Why not ask these white vegans what their motivations are for doing vegan activism as opposed to assuming them? In her view, is it even possible for a non-oppressed person, such as a white person, to advocate for animals without participating in so-called appropriated oppression? What about the possibility of a white person recognizing they are not oppressed and wanting to use this privileged position to help fight for the oppressed? Why not seek to confirm if this is happening rather than baselessly make a giant psychological assessment of an entire group of people?
Which is where we get this wanton disregard for human atrocities and the comparison of marginalized people to animals. Which is why we have Francesca here comparing animal agriculture to human slavery and denying women the right to vote.
All right, guys. Francesca is not comparing animal agriculture to human slavery in this tweet. She is showing that if a person is going to call animal agriculture ethical because it is legal, the same person will have to consider slavery and denying women the right to vote to have been good things when they were legal. It's like Imani just sees the words human slavery or denying women the right to vote and thinks a comparison is being made. If you read the tweet carefully, this is not what is happening at all. And just remember, everybody, we are seeking a substantiation for the claim that the majority of white veganism is leading people into the alt-right pipeline. We still have not seen evidence of this.
They also disregard the needs of disabled people and poor people, who have very valid concerns about their ability to go vegan.
Francesca doesn't seem to be disregarding the needs of poor people and disabled people in this tweet. She seems to be venting over people assuming that disabled people and poor people inherently cannot be vegan.
To them, human suffering is just a tool with which, from their own vantage point of assumed oppression, they get to decide who lives and who dies.
What is she even talking about here?
You have quite classic framing often used by pro-lifers too, such as the minimization of the Holocaust and calling animal agriculture the Holocaust, therefore comparing Jewish people to animals and livestock.
All right, so she is literally debunking herself in her own screenshot. And I'm Jewish, so I guess the things I'm saying here have extra weight to some of these types of people. Listen closely. Francesca is not comparing what animals go through to the Holocaust of World War II. She is saying that by definition, what animals go through is a Holocaust, not the Holocaust. It literally says it right there. She showed a debunk of her own claim while making the claim.
Similarly, you have this individual that I screenshotted before they had the opportunity to delete it, who said they wanted to wipe out the entire bloodline of a Jewish person who was talking about keeping kosher.
Yeah, so the original tweet is deleted, so I can't find the original context for it. But even if we assume this is a completely anti-Semitic tweet coming from a vegan, how is this, on top of the other bad examples listed throughout this video, evidence that the majority of white veganism is luring people into the alt-right pipeline? It's not.
And while this may have been a troll, very real people agreed with them and minimize the anti-Semitic remarks that were said.
This is not a person agreeing with them. This is somebody showing the absurdity of claiming vegans are racist because a single person said they hope that all meat eaters burn in hell.
You then have this vegan saying that chattel slavery was merely a blip compared to animal exploitation.
So we have another instance of Imani debunking her own claim with a screenshot she willingly put in the video while making the claim. The tweet says, in terms of raw numbers at the end. Imani described the tweet as saying that chattel slavery was nearly a blip compared to animal exploitation, when she's literally showing the the full context right there. And yeah, if we're going simply off of raw numbers, of course animal exploitation is worse. There are only around 8 billion humans who even exist, and we kill trillions of animals every year simply for consumption. This tweet is true. Oh, and by the way, Skeej claims they are a person of color, but Imani's followers just think this is a lie.
And then this person even tweeted at me a picture of dead black people, comparing them to meat. Because black people are always going to be livestock to vegans.
As weird as this post is, how does this tweet show that, quote, black people are always going to be livestock to vegans, let alone white vegans? Like, why is she even saying vegans here? Wasn't this video supposed to be about white veganism and white vegans?
And again, all of this is because I asked if vegan cheese melts.
No, it's not. We have more of what seems like dishonesty coming from Imani.
And another disturbing aspect is how they weaponize this thing called speciesism, basically acting like it's reverse racism. Because again, they see themselves as a proxy for these animals. They're just utilizing their veganism as a mechanism to be racist. Because looking at everything that was said to me yesterday, and keep in mind, this is just a handful of the thousands of comments like this that I got. They can't possibly be or even want to convert people to veganism. That, in and of itself, is not their goal. With these numbers, they can't even pretend to want to be effective. Veganism is just their placeholder for the moral superiority felt with Christianity. It's like when abusers in the church go into New Age spirituality. They get to pretend and adopt a moral superiority, while simultaneously benefiting from the exact same structures that they pretend that they're getting away from. Additionally, they're not recruiting new vegans. They're making sure that the existing ones don't leave the alt-right pipeline that they're leading them along.
So we have more mass psychoanalysis here, which in the context of this video is simply based on a few tweets she has shown about the majority of white vegans. Do I even need to explain the lack of evidence supporting her mass psychoanalysis here? She said the majority of white vegans are not trying to create new vegans. They're making sure that the existing ones don't leave the alt-right pipeline. What is your evidence for this exactly? I don't understand this at all. On this side of the internet, are we just allowed to make very rhetorically nice sounding statements that include very bold claims without citing sufficient evidence to support them?
Many of these same vegan accounts were following and retweeting right-wing and alt-right accounts, liking and reposting racist, transphobic, homophobic, anti-Semitic, all the ism type of things.
Let's assume all of this is true even though she didn't cite any evidence. Again, how would this, on top of all the other stuff she cited in this video, substantiate her original claim about the majority of white veganism leading or luring people to the alt-right pipeline?
If these are your brand ambassadors for white veganism, then would you want to be vegan? In fact, that was a major part of the discussion that was had yesterday. Quite a few black and brown people who are technically vegans do not want to identify as such, to not be lumped in with that. Because why would you want to sidle up to a racist over chicken nuggets?
I love how she just says this as though she just showed this all to be true. At this point, I think that she just doesn't understand how bold the claim she made at the beginning of the video really is. Given what we've covered so far, I think it is clear that we cannot look at Imani as somebody to accurately determine whether a tweet should be labeled as racist, anti-Semitic, transphobic, etc. I mean, even here, a vegan said meat is bad for the environment and causes heart disease, which Imani quote tweeted and called fat-phobic. There was no context missing here. The person simply stated that meat causes heart disease, and Imani took this as fat-phobic. And let's not forget this example too. She called this tweet appropriated oppression. Apparently recognizing an injustice and asking people to not participate in it is appropriated oppression. As I asked earlier, is it even possible in Imani's view for a white person to be a vegan activist without participating in appropriated oppression? And I want to read something from somebody who made a response to Imani but wants to remain anonymous. I think it was a great response and really sums up the absurdity of Imani's epistemic standards. Quote, also, for all the pearl clutching she does about people carelessly comparing devastating human atrocities to issues that she deems as far less significant, it's interesting that she would go on to retweet a post likening vegans to Nazis and also claim that the vegan symbol is effectively a hate symbol, all based on her interaction with Twitter vegans whose tweets we've already established she's far too willing to liberally attach an ism or phobic label to. If mass breeding, confining, torturing, and slaughtering 100 billion individuals a year, all while destroying the environment and poisoning or murdering surrounding communities, isn't enough to qualify the issue as being comparable to the Holocaust, then why the does a bunch of vegans spamming your mentions with rude and admittedly in some cases genuinely disgusting shit qualify for these types of comparisons? Personally, the standard seems a bit askew. Alright guys, well that's the end of the video. We didn't get to respond to her notes post that she made that obviously sparked most of this. But if this is something you would like to see, let me know below. It's clear that a lot of things that Imani says can maybe, I'm not even sure, sound rhetorically good. But when you go as far as to assess the substance of her claims, and if she's actually properly substantiating them, you will find little to nothing. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for watching. If you support my work and want to get early access to it, you can click the link in the pinned comment and support me on Patreon. And through this, you can also get one-on-one messaging with me. And if you don't know, I do have a book going over most, if not all, of the anti-vegan arguments you can hear online. If you want to get that as well, that'll be linked in the pinned comment. If you want to support the channel by buying merchandise or vegan protein powder, that'll also be linked in the pinned comment. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Dude,
Fuck off. I don't want anything to do with you. Don't ever speak to me again. You're a fucking piece of shit.
even vegans don't get your weird, stupid wannabe sense of irony here. Who is your audience? Nobody gets these dumb jokes. Dude,